Hi there, it's Candice here from Hey Sweet Art, and this month we are going to be painting an easy sunset safari watercolor painting. For this you'll need my safari template, a 1-inch hake brush, and then a couple various sizes of round brushes. I'm also going to be using a masking marker by Goya and a speedball pickup, which is a cement rubber eraser. And what that basically does is once the painting is complete and everything is dry, you can use that pickup eraser to remove that masking marker from your page, and it won't destroy the paper underneath. To begin, I've just turned over my template, and using the side of my pencil, I'm rubbing some of the graphite onto the page, and this will serve as our transfer medium when we flip it over and apply it to our watercolor paper using a ballpoint pen to trace over the outline. It will then gently transfer that graphite onto your watercolor paper. I'm going to be painting in my Hahnemuhle sketchbook. It's a watercolor sketchbook, and I've just popped my template over, and I'll just use a ballpoint pen to trace over the outline. You might have noticed that the outline doesn't include the treetop, and obviously it doesn't include the circle. So I'm going to trace in everything, including the trunk of the tree and all of its branches. And then I'm going to use a bowl to provide the outline that we're going to work within, so the border outline. And when we get to painting, when it comes to the treetop, we're actually going to improvise a little. So you'll have the reference as a guide from which to follow, but you can also get a little bit creative in a sense with how you jot down your foliage. That step is just a lot of mark making, so essentially you want it to be quite organic, and this is why I didn't include a border or an outline for where the treetop placement is meant to go. I have my trusty bowl ready, and I'm just going to have a peep to make sure that it's as close to the giraffe and the two trees on the bottom for placement, just so that I know I have enough space towards the top of the circle where my treetop is actually going to come in. Before we move on from here, I'm going to use the masking marker just to draw in my sun. So obviously everything in the foreground will be in silhouette, and you can also be creative with your placement here. I'm just going to do it towards the bottom and fairly central, but I've done this a few times now, sometimes overlapping behind the tree branches so that it appears as though it's behind the tree, and this can also look quite effective. So you can be a little bit creative with where you place your masking marker for the sun. Ultimately, when you start bringing in your colors, you just want to have predominantly yellow around that sunshiny area. While I'm waiting for the masking marker to dry, I'm just going to use a pencil to go over my giraffe and just make it very clear so that I don't lose it in behind the colors when I start painting. I'll also just have a look at the tree where it's quite light. I might just go over just to bring back some of the darker strokes. To begin, we are going to mix our colors, and our first step involves the hake brush, because we are going to use that to lay in our water. And the first few layers will be with a size 8 round brush. I'm using the Kum Memory Point round brush. So you can keep your color palette quite simple with this painting. I am mixing a red. I'll mix up an orange using my vermilion and cadmium yellow, and then I'm going to have just the cadmium yellow. So I've got the 3 colors. I'm also going to mix a little bit of the quinacridone rose, just so that I have a pinkish hue coming in. So I'll have the 4 colors to choose from, but I'm predominantly working in the red, the orange, and the yellow. Just double checked that your masking marker or masking fluid is dry before you begin. Mine is. I'm just using the hake brush to go in and paint my circle with clean water. So you just want to make sure you have a nice sheen of water on your paper. It's not overly saturated. We're just creating a nice moist surface in which we are going to introduce our color paints. When you're happy that your surface is fully covered with water, you can start introducing your color. I'm going to start with my lightest, being the yellow, and I'm introducing that around my masked off sun area. So around the sun, I want it to be the lightest color, and then I'm going to gradually build out with all the other colors. And yeah, I'm just gonna keep it free and easy. I'm not being too prescriptive with where I'm putting any of these colors down. We are going to be painting over the giraffe and the tree, so it doesn't matter if you paint through them, because essentially they're going to be in silhouette, so we'll paint over it. And because watercolor is a transparent medium, it's quite nice to have that color beneath it, so that what shines through, if you have any areas in your silhouette that are transparent, and it shows through those warm colors beneath it, it just adds to the atmosphere of the painting. This watercolor paper that I'm working on in the sketchbook is not quite cold pressed. It is sort of an in-between hot press and cold press in terms of texture. And so the bleed effect into other colors is not necessarily as strong as it would be if I was on 100% cold pressed textured paper. So I am trying to maneuver it a little bit more and push them colors into each other. on your paper you might get a nicer sort of reaction compared to what I'm getting on this paper at the moment. But it's okay. I just want to do something fun and easy, just to get a painting out for the start of this month. Along the borders of my painting, I'm going in with some of the stronger pigment. This is just to add a little bit of drama and interest, and yeah, just keep things always moving in a sense. Towards the top, I'm going to bring in stronger pigmented reds and quinacridone rose, so just to give it more of an atmosphere. I also like this contrast here for the next step, where I'm going to use a scrunched up paper towel and just lift off some sections where I want to place sort of cloud effects into the painting. Using the paper towel scrunched up, I'm just dabbing across my painting, and it's lifting off some of that wet paint. And I'm just doing this to give a sort of impression of a cloud. And I'm going to do a couple of these, obviously bearing in mind that there is foliage coming to the top of my tree, but I'm just adding some extra texture into my painting, and this is not necessarily a compulsory step. You can decide whether you want to or not, and you can decide how much to do, if you want to do more, if you want to do less, or smaller or bigger. It's up to you. I'm not so happy with what I've lifted off here, so I'm actually just going to reintroduce some paint. I'm just going in with my paintbrush, and I am bringing in some of the paint back over that texture where my tissue paper had lifted for the cloud. I'm going to leave the background to dry now, and I'm actually going to mix up the color for the silhouetted portion or elements of the painting. So to mix my black color, I am actually going to use two colors. I'm mixing straight into my orange mixture because for the two colors I'm using my black and I'm going to use the vermilion. So I want it to also be quite saturated, so I'm just adding quite a bit of pigment here, and I will mix in the two colors, black and vermilion, to get my very nice warm sort of black. The reason why I'm not just using a flat black is because it can be quite cold and maybe not as dynamic as it would, or feel as luscious as it would if it was this warmer black. Before you go at your painting, you want to just swatch it out and see if it is the color that you would like with your painting. I'm just enriching mine ever so slightly with a little bit more of both pigments, because I can see my first one is more on the light side, so I just added a bit more black. That's maybe too black, so now I've added a little bit more of both the black and the vermilion, just to enriching it even more. You want to make sure that your entire background is dry before you continue. You are welcome to use a hairdryer if you want to speed things up. And then once it's dry, you're going to downsize your brush. So I'm going to downsize to a size 4, and we're going to paint in our silhouetted background. My template doesn't include a tail on the giraffe, so I'm just going to add that quickly with a nice small brush. And I'm just gonna, it mostly will get hidden by the grass layer that's coming, but I'm just gonna add a slight tail coming out the rear of the giraffe. I'm also going to introduce the ground now, and I'm trying to connect it while my elements are slightly wet, so that there's no like definitive line between giraffe, tree and ground. I kind of want them all to appear as though they are part of the same background. Your ground doesn't necessarily have to be just a dead straight line. You can add what appears to be bumps in the road, or like little rocks, whatever sort of shape you want that ground to take. It doesn't need to be dead straight, is what I'm saying. Some of my students have done this where it had a bit of a rolling hill effect, which was really nice. So you can be creative with this ground area as well. Once I have in the main elements of my silhouette, I'm just going to pull in some short C-curve brush strokes to give the impression of grass. Moving on to our trees now, we are just going to use sort of mark making. I kind of would call this like stippling or even scumbling, although it's not really a dry brush, but it's more just dotting your brush along the paper and creating these very organic shapes. So there's no real control in a sense, it's more just like allowing the brush to take on its organic form. While the grass is sort of wet in this bottom area, I'm actually going to run through with some more paint into the ground just to sort of tie that grass into that bottom area of the painting. Back to my other tree again, just with that organic mark making, creating shapes. I'm going to give the impression of the leaves on the tree. This is where you might like to have a look at the reference and follow it a little bit more closely. I'm going to start on the treetop, and there is quite a nice shape that you can emulate or you draw inspiration from in the reference. So it's just nice to have a look at to see where the tree is fuller and where it's a little bit more sparse. And again, I'm using the same technique of those dotted brush strokes. There are some areas in the treetop where things are a bit more dense, so like I would lessen the sort of dotting and make it more swooping so it covers a greater area. But yeah, it's a nice relaxing repetitive motion if that kind of thing relaxes you, but you want to basically get that feeling of organic shapes, so every stroke looks a bit different to the one before. So this is kind of where I was talking about, because I've incorporated the top and the bottom, I'm now using my brush a little bit more liberally in terms of pressure and filling up that space more than if I am doing those individual little dots. So towards the outskirts of my tree top, on the bottom and the top of that little tree, I have more spaces showing through, and then as I get into the middle where it's a lot more dense, I'm allowing that paint to cover more surface area. I need to mix up a little bit more of this paint because we have basically run out of what we had originally mixed. So I'm going in with that vermilion again, and into that mixture I'm going to add my black. I'm now going to go through with a second pass. I've downsized my brush as well, just so that towards the outsides areas of the tree tops I can make those dots a little bit smaller, so it just adds a little bit more to that three-dimensional feeling. I'm also just going to bring it through because it is a transparent medium and my bottom layer has started drying. Now when we go over, it is appearing as a darker value. I'm darkening things up a little bit on the bottom now, and I'm probably going to add a few more blades of grass just to give more atmosphere to that bottom area. When I am done, I'm going to use the Speedball pickup, which is the cement rubber eraser. I'm just going to gently rub that over the masking fluid or masking marker, just to lift that off of my page, and it will restore back to the white of the page. And then before I call it a day and finish up with the painting, I'm just going to use a very light wash of the yellow and paint in a little bit of that sun, but leaving a white outline around it. And that's just to create a little bit of interest and not have a stark white sun in the middle of my composition. So there you have it, the painting is complete, and I hope that you enjoyed it as much as I did. It's really just a nice, easy, any of these silhouette kind of paintings when you can be quite free with the background and then you paint your silhouette in the foreground. They're really lovely and easy to do, and if you are wanting to just create something small in a small amount of time, or just add to a page in your sketchbook, this is quite a nice little exercise to take on. I thank you for joining and painting along with me if you did. I would love to see what you've created, so if you are keen to share, you can tag me on Instagram at heysweet.art, and feel free to connect with me. You can also just pop me a message in my Instagram DMs anytime. And then obviously on our Patreon community, you can share your completed works in one of the chats, and even your works in progress. I'd love to engage more with you. And thank you again for your support on the Patreon channel. It really does mean a lot to me.